The Coruscant skyline burned orange as another day of war ended, but inside the Senate chambers, a different kind of battle was beginning. Chancellor Palpatine sat across from Master Windu, his weathered face etched with concern that seemed almost genuine. Between them, holographic intelligence reports flickered. Casualty lists from Felucia, supply line disruptions near Ryloth, and most troubling of all, intercepted communications suggesting a Sith presence within the Republic's own ranks. The purple glow of passing speeders cast shadows across Windu's face as he studied the data. These reports showed patterns that couldn't be ignored. Security breaches aligned too perfectly with certain deployments. Someone with the highest clearance was feeding information to the enemy. Palpatine leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper as he planted his poison. Master Windu, I hesitate to even suggest this, but these security breaches coincide with young Skywalker's assignments. The Chosen One? That's a serious implication, Chancellor. The prophecy speaks of balance, but what if balance means standing between light and dark, wielding both? The seed was planted with surgical precision. Within hours, Windu had called an emergency session of the Council. As Yoda listened to the concerns, his ears drooped slightly, centuries of wisdom warring with newfound uncertainty. Ki-Adi-Mundi accessed deployment records on his datapad, cross-referencing Anakin's missions with the breaches. The correlations were there, coincidental perhaps, but undeniable. The Chancellor's words echoed in their mind as they reviewed each suspicious alignment. In trying to protect the Republic from the Sith, they had begun to see shadows everywhere, even among their own. The first step toward darkness is always taken in the name of protection, and the Council had just taken that step without realizing the path they had chosen. The shift began subtly, but accelerated rapidly. Where once the Jedi had waited for clear evidence of separatist activity, now they struck preemptively based on probability assessments and intelligence fragments. Master Plo Koon led a strike force to Malastare based on intelligence suggesting possible droid factories hidden in the underground caverns. They found only refugee camps filled with families fleeing the war. Kit Fisto's aquatic assault on Mon Cala targeted suspected arms dealers who turned out to be medical supply runners trying to help overwhelmed hospitals. In the lower levels of Coruscant, crowds began to gather in numbers not seen since the war's beginning. Banners reading Jedi Overlords and Who Watches the Watchers appeared overnight on every street corner. A Twi'lek mother stood before a makeshift memorial constructed from debris and candles, her voice carrying over the assembled crowd of hundreds. The memorial bore images of civilians killed in Jedi preemptive strikes, faces that once trusted the Order for protection. Report what, Cody? Citizens exercising their right to speak? General, shouldn't we report this gathering to the Council? When did we become the ones they fear? Back in the temple, the Council convened again with increasing frequency. This time, their discussions centered on control and containment. Master Windu proposed expanded surveillance protocols that would monitor not just communications, but force-sensitive individuals across the galaxy. The very foundations of the temple seemed to darken as fear took root in the hearts of those who were meant to be above such emotions. Yoda's gimmer stick tapped against the floor in a rhythm that had once brought comfort, but now seemed to count down to something inevitable. Each tap marked another step away from the light, another compromise made in the name of security. The Jedi were becoming everything they had sworn to oppose, and the tragedy was that they believed they were saving the Republic. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. We thank you all for your continued support. The council chamber felt colder than usual as Anakin stood before them, his mechanical hand clenched behind his back in barely controlled frustration. He had just returned from Cato Neimoidia, where his quick thinking and unconventional tactics had saved an entire battalion from walking into a separatist trap. The mission had been a complete success, 500 clone lives saved, critical intelligence gathered, and minimal casualties. He expected commendation for his initiative. He received suspicion that cut deeper than any lightsaber wound. The council sat in their circle, elevated above him as always, their faces masks of judgment. Ki-Adi-Mundi's elongated head tilted as he reviewed the mission report on his datapad. The silence stretched uncomfortably long before anyone spoke. Anakin could feel their doubt radiating through the Force like a cold wind. His methods had involved consulting with local crime syndicates for intelligence about separatist movements, groups who knew the underground networks better than any Republic intelligence. It had been pragmatic, effective, and had saved lives. Your methods involved consulting with crime syndicates, associations that raise questions about your judgment. Those crime syndicates knew the terrain better than our scouts. Would you prefer I let the 501st walk into an ambush? This is precisely why you will not be granted the rank of Master. Your emotional volatility makes you a liability. The words hung in the air like a challenge that struck at everything Anakin had sacrificed for the Order. His hand moved instinctively toward his lightsaber, not to draw it, but a reflexive gesture born of years of combat and frustration. Every member of the council tensed, hands shifting toward their own weapons. The moment passed, but the damage was done. They had seen what they expected to see: aggression, instability, danger. Anakin forced his hand away, forced himself to breathe through the anger. He turned and left before they could dismiss him, his footsteps echoing through the temple halls like thunderclaps. Behind him, the council remained in session, their suspicions confirmed by a gesture they had provoked. The restricted section of the Jedi archives had always been off-limits to knights, but Anakin had learned long ago that rules were more like guidelines when you knew the right codes. The security systems were designed to keep out external threats, not someone who had spent years learning the temple's every secret. His fingers flew across the terminal, bypassing security protocols with a skill that would have made most slicers jealous. The deeper he delved into the classified files, the more his blood ran cold with disbelief. Project Luminos materialized on the screen in stark detail, a force sensitivity surveillance network designed to track and catalog every Force user in the galaxy, trained or untrained, adult or child. The program went beyond simple identification. It included psychological profiles, predictive behavior models, and most disturbingly, a containment protocol for those deemed aberrant. The project documentation bore the seal of the High Council itself. Contingency plans detailed forced relocations, mandatory training camps, and in extreme cases, force suppression techniques that hadn't been used since the ancient Sith Wars. They asked me to implement it 3 weeks ago. Master Yoda himself gave the authorization. This is wrong. This is everything the Sith would do. Though I confess, I share your concerns. In 900 years, Master Yoda has never approved anything so aggressive. Anakin downloaded the files to a secure datapad, his mind racing with the implications. The chief librarian watched him with ancient eyes that had seen the Order at its best and was now witnessing its worst. She made no move to stop him as he copied file after file of damning evidence. The surveillance network was already partially operational, with reports coming in from core worlds about Force-sensitive children being cataloged without their family's knowledge. The Jedi Order, founded to protect Force users, was now creating lists that could be used to control or eliminate them. As Anakin left the archives, he carried with him proof that the Guardians had become the Wardens. The veranda of Padme's apartment offered one of the best views of Coruscant's sunset, but neither she nor Anakin were admiring the transformed skyline. She had just finished reading the Project Luminos files on the secure datapad, her face pale with disbelief at what the Order had become. The documentation was thorough, clinical, and utterly horrifying in its implications for democracy and freedom. Traffic streams flowed past in endless rivers of light, oblivious to the conspiracy unfolding above them. Padme sat down the datapad with trembling hands and took both of Anakin's hands in hers, mechanical and flesh alike, grounding him with her touch. Her years in the Senate had taught her to recognize the signs of institutional collapse, and she saw them everywhere now. The whispers in the Senate chambers had grown to open discussions. Several systems were already drafting withdrawal documents, not to join the Separatists, but to escape both sides of a war that had consumed its own principles. The Jedi are losing public trust. These preemptive strikes, people see the Order as another authoritarian force. The Council would never allow it. They already think I'm too emotional, too attached, too human. And maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs, a Jedi who remembers what it's like to be human. Before Anakin could respond to her plea, his comlink buzzed with urgent intensity. Obi-Wan's voice crackled through, tense and barely controlled. An incident had occurred in the lower levels that demanded immediate attention. As Anakin prepared to leave, Padme pulled him back for one last moment, pressing an encrypted comlink into his hand. She had been building her own network of senators and activists who still believed in democracy. If the Jedi Order was falling to darkness, they would need allies outside the temple. The Republic's future might depend not on the wisdom of the Council, but on the courage of those willing to stand up against it. The smoke hadn't cleared when the Council arrived at level 1313, the acrid smell of blaster fire and burned flesh hanging heavy in the recycled air. What intelligence had suggested was a Sith artifact auction had turned into a massacre that would echo through the lower levels for years. Kit Fisto stood among the wreckage, his usual smile replaced by an expression of horror that seemed alien on his amphibian features. Saesee Tin's lightsaber still hummed in his hand, the blade trembling as his grip loosened and tightened repeatedly. Bodies lay scattered across the marketplace. Rodians, Twi'leks, humans, and others who had simply been in the wrong place when the Jedi struck. Obi-Wan knelt beside one of the victims, a Rodian child no more than 12 standard years old. The child clutched something in his small hand. When Obi-Wan gently pried it free, his heart sank. a toy blaster, the kind sold at any market for a few credits, painted bright colors to ensure no one would mistake it for real. The only darkness I sense here now is our own. Casualties are inevitable in war. These people chose to associate with dark side practitioners. That child's name was Velo. He wanted to be a pilot. I helped relocate his family here 6 months ago. The crowd of lower-level inhabitants had begun to gather at the perimeter, held back by clone troopers whose helmets hid their own discomfort. Their faces showed fear, anger, and something worse, resignation, as if they had always known it would come to this. The Jedi had become what they feared in their enemies. Yoda arrived last, hovering in his chair like a specter of the Order's former wisdom. He surveyed the destruction, and just for a moment, something flickered in his ancient eyes. Doubt, regret, recognition of what they had become. But then it was gone, buried under 900 years of certainty that the Jedi way was the right way. The dark side had claimed its victory not through combat, but through fear dressed as wisdom. The Chancellor's office was dim when Anakin arrived, summoned by an encrypted message that had bypassed normal Senate channels. Palpatine stood with his back to the door, gazing out at the city lights that stretched endlessly in every direction. A galaxy of lives under his subtle influence. The room felt heavy with unspoken truths, the kind that could reshape worlds when finally revealed. Anakin could sense something different tonight, a dropping of pretense that had always existed between them. Palpatine turned slowly, and his expression was one of genuine sorrow, or such a perfect imitation that even Anakin's Force senses couldn't detect the deception. The Chancellor moved with the careful deliberation of someone about to reveal a terrible truth. His words came measured, each one calculated for maximum impact while maintaining the illusion of reluctant honesty. He had been watching the Jedi's descent with great interest, orchestrating some moves while simply allowing others to unfold naturally from the seeds of fear he had planted. The fear of the Sith has driven them to become the very thing they swore to destroy. They suspect me of being a Sith Lord. How convenient for the actual Sith. While they chase shadows, the real darkness grows, from within their own hearts. For once, Anakin sensed no deception in the Chancellor's words, because the most devastating weapon Palpatine wielded was the truth itself. The Sith Lord stood before him, hiding in plain sight, using honesty as a shield. He didn't need to lie about the Jedi's fall, because they were doing it themselves. Every word was carefully chosen to push Anakin further from the Order while maintaining his trust in the one person who was orchestrating everything. The Chancellor's genius lay not in complex deceptions, but in simply showing people what they already feared to see. As Anakin left the office, he carried with him doubts that Palpatine hadn't created, but had merely awakened. Doubts that would soon tear the Order apart from within. The explosion rocked the Jedi Temple's communications center at dawn, precise charges taking out exactly the servers containing Project Luminos data, while leaving surrounding systems untouched. No casualties, but the damage was surgical. All records of the surveillance network, all lists of Force-sensitive individuals, destroyed beyond recovery. Security hollows showed a cloaked figure moving with familiar agility, lightsaber blazing through security systems. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to show distinctive fighting patterns that any Jedi would recognize. The Council assembled within the hour, their faces grim as they reviewed the evidence. Ki-Adi-Mundi had already run pattern analysis on the combat movements, comparing them to training records. The mathematical certainty of his conclusions left little room for doubt, though Obi-Wan desperately searched for alternative explanations. The destruction had been too precise, too targeted. Whoever did this knew exactly where Project Luminos was stored and how to destroy it completely. Recall orders are being transmitted now. Every Jedi in the field will be watching for him. This is madness. We're turning on one of our own without proper investigation. Add Kenobi to the watch list. He's not to leave the temple. The vote was swift and unanimous, save for Obi-Wan's objection and Yoda's abstention. Anakin Skywalker was declared rogue, a threat to the Order and the Republic. The irony that they were using the very surveillance network he had opposed to hunt him was lost on no one, but fear had replaced wisdom in the Council's deliberations. Across the galaxy, clone commanders received encrypted orders marking the Chosen One as a priority target. Obi-Wan strode from the chamber knowing he had just hours before Temple guards would arrive to ensure his compliance. The Council had chosen fear over faith, and in doing so had driven away their greatest hope. The prophecy of the Chosen One bringing balance to the Force was about to be fulfilled, just not in the way anyone had expected. The maintenance shaft beneath the temple was cramped and dark, one of the few places in the entire structure without surveillance after the morning's sabotage. Anakin nearly ignited his lightsaber when a figure dropped down beside him, his reflexes honed by weeks of avoiding temple guards and reconnaissance droids. The familiar presence in the Force stopped him just in time, a presence he had known since childhood, one that meant safety and trust, despite everything that had happened. Obi-Wan's face was haggard from his own escape, but a ghost of his old smile played at his lips as he settled into the cramped space. They sat in silence for a moment, two fugitives in the very temple that had been their home. The absurdity of their situation, two of the Order's most decorated heroes hiding like criminals in their own sanctuary, wasn't lost on either of them. Around them, they could sense the confusion and doubt spreading through the temple's younger inhabitants as news of the declaration spread. If you had destroyed those files, you would have done a much messier job. Precision was never your strong suit. The council won't listen. They've gone too far, too afraid. Then we make them listen. Tomorrow, all 12 members convene in the Great Hall. Together, old friend. Obi-Wan pulled out a datapad showing intelligence Ahsoka had been gathering through her own network of supporters. The younger knights and Padawans were questioning everything, seeing the council's actions as a betrayal of the code they had all sworn to uphold. Tomorrow's gathering about martial law would have an audience the council didn't expect. The maintenance shaft suddenly felt less like a hiding place and more like a command center for a revolution neither of them had wanted, but both now recognized as necessary. They had been master and apprentice, then peers, and now they would stand as brothers against the Order that had raised them. The Force hummed with possibility and danger as they planned their confrontation with the 12 most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. The Great Hall of the Jedi Temple had seen many gatherings over millennia, but never one quite like this moment of reckoning. Word had spread through the younger knights and Padawans like wildfire through drought-stricken grass. When the council arrived for their session to formalize martial law, they found the hall filled with hundreds of silent witnesses, Jedi of all ages who had come to see what their order had become. At the center of this arena stood Anakin and Obi-Wan, lightsabers at their sides, but deliberately not in their hands. The council members spread out in a semicircle, their faces masks of anger and betrayal at this insurrection in their sacred halls. One by one, their lightsabers ignited, Windu's purple, Kit Fisto's green, Plo Koon's blue, Saesee Tien's green, Agent Kolar's azure, until the chamber blazed with deadly light. The younger Jedi pressed back against the walls, torn between loyalty to the council and horror at what they were witnessing. The very air crackled with Force energy as two of the Order's greatest heroes faced its entire leadership. We won't fight you. Even now, even after everything, you're still our family. Fight back! No. What followed was unlike any battle in Jedi history, a dance of nonviolence against aggression. Obi-Wan and Anakin flowed like water around the council's attacks, never striking back, never drawing their blades, using the Force only to redirect and evade. With each missed strike, each moment of violence met with passive resistance, cracks appeared in the council's resolve. The assembled witnesses watched in growing understanding as their leaders attacked two unarmed men who refused to return violence with violence. It was Yoda who stopped first, his ancient lightsaber deactivating with a sound like a dying breath. His next words would echo through the Force for generations. One by one, the other blades lowered as the council members saw themselves reflected in the eyes of those they were trying to strike down, not as wise leaders, but as aggressors consumed by fear. The Senate chamber erupted in chaos as the emergency session convened with unprecedented attendance from across the galaxy. Chancellor Palpatine sat in his pod, his expression one of carefully crafted concern as the Jedi Council publicly confessed their actions before billions of witnesses. The Project Luminos files had been released on the HoloNet, and the galaxy recoiled at what the Guardians of Peace had planned. But while others watched the Council's humiliation, Anakin watched Palpatine, noticing the slight upturn of his lips, the satisfaction gleaming in his eyes like distant stars. Moving through the chamber with Force-enhanced agility, Anakin approached the Chancellor's pod while the confession continued. The Senate guards made no move to stop him. After all, he was still technically a Jedi, albeit a rogue one. Palpatine's mask of concern never wavered as Anakin drew near, but something else flickered in the Force between them. Acknowledgement, perhaps even respect for a game well played. The Chancellor had won without ever revealing himself, without igniting a lightsaber or using the dark side openly. You orchestrated all of this. You're the Sith Lord. The Council destroyed themselves. I remain the benevolent Chancellor, ready to restore order. I'll stop you. The truth was more devastating than any lightsaber duel could have been. Palpatine had won by letting the Jedi defeat themselves. He had no need to reveal himself as a Sith when the fear had done his work for him. But his victory was not as complete as he believed. Without the Jedi as enemies, without the war as justification, his carefully constructed power base began to crack. The Senate, seeing the Council's confession, also began to question all authority, including his. Within weeks, investigations would begin into war profiteering, into the origins of the clone army, into a dozen threads that would unravel everything Palpatine had built. The Sith Lord would disappear one night, his grand plan undone not by Jedi or soldiers, but by the simple truth that fear alone cannot sustain an empire. 3 months later, the galaxy looked fundamentally different from the war-torn chaos it had been. In the ancient ruins of the first Jedi Temple on Tython, where the Order had begun millennia ago, a new gathering took place beneath stars unmarred by battle. The group was small, no more than 30 beings who had survived the Order's collapse and chose to begin again. Anakin stood before them not as the chosen one of prophecy, but as someone who had chosen a different path when darkness seemed the only option. Obi-Wan stood at his right side, their friendship stronger for having survived its greatest test. Ahsoka had returned from her self-imposed exile, bringing with her Force sensitives who had hidden from both the Old Order and the war. Even Yoda attended, humbled and seeking redemption, his centuries of certainty replaced with questions he should have asked long ago. The gathering included Jedi who had been declared rogue, Padawans who had questioned their masters, and Force sensitives who had never known the temple's rigid structure. We build something new. Jedi who live among the people, not above them in towers. And who will lead this new order? For now, I will, not as a master above others, but as a guide alongside them. Padme appeared at the entrance with Luke and Leia in her arms. Twins born into a galaxy at peace, who would know their father not as a fallen hero, but as a reformer who chose the harder path. The new order would have no grand temple reaching toward the sky, no council sitting in judgment. Instead, Jedi would live in communities across the galaxy, learning from those they protected, teaching those who sought knowledge, and always remembering that attachment and emotion were not weaknesses, but the very things that connected them to life itself. As the twin suns set over Tython's ancient mountains, the Force sang with a harmony it hadn't known for 1,000 years. Balance achieved not through victory or defeat, but through understanding that even the wisest could fall, and even the fallen could rise to build something better. The galaxy would remember this as the moment that mercy proved stronger than might, when refusing to fight became the greatest victory of all. Sometimes a single choice to resist darkness, even when that darkness comes from those you trust most, can reshape the destiny of trillions. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of what might have been, remember to hit that subscribe button and join us for more explorations of the infinite possibilities within that galaxy far, far away. May the Force be with you, always.